Right, ladies and gentlemen, the presentation is about to begin. Good afternoon, I'm Nicholas from 5th Year Studio EDU, and I'll be representing the Aung Fest event planning team to be your moderator today. First of all, thank you all for joining us this afternoon, especially to our new fellow students, and I would like to sincerely welcome you to our online sharing session. The theme for today's session is going deeper and beyond architecture, and we are honored and privileged to have the opportunity to listen and to be inspired by two speakers today. After each sharing, we'll be open up the floor for a 15 minutes Q&A session. You can also type your question in the chat box if you are too shy to speak up, and I will raise them up during the Q&A. The sequence of today would be starting off with Nicholas' presentation, followed by a 15 minutes Q&A, then Kai's presentation and another 15 minutes of Q&A before we end the session. It will be from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Before we begin, we shall take a screenshot together for attendance. Ian, can you please help to manage that?
Okay, so we take a screenshot right now. Okay, 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you. All right, without further ado, let me introduce you to our first esteemed speaker today, architect Nicholas Ling. Currently, he is a partner at Konzepte Asia Sdn Bhd, which is an international interdisciplinary design firm which brings together a team of architects, designers, and thinkers from across KL, Melbourne, and Phnom Penh. He has led many complex and multidisciplinary projects since. Among the notable projects are Hammond House, Vietnamese Museum of Australia, Heritage Hotel Phnom Penh, the Commune, KL Wellness City, as well as the Pavilion Bukit Jalil. Prior to his partnership with Konzepte Asia since 2016, Nicholas Ling was an associate architect at Lion Studio in Melbourne for 6 years, where he led the delivery of public projects with a combined value of over $1 billion. During his time in Melbourne, he also contributed to the undergraduate and master's architecture program at RMIT University. Besides his current position in Konzepte Asia, he is also still leading his own design firm in Melbourne, which is called the Particular Architects. So I would like to welcome the speaker to deliver the presentation. Mr. Nicholas, you can share your slide and the floor is yours.
Sorry, Nicholas, you're muted.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You see my slides?
Yes, but it's not in full screen mode yet.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, full screen now.
Okay, firstly, thanks for having me share. I think share is a better word than lecture or talk. So what I thought I'll do today is take you through a sort of a rapid fire series of slides, and then perhaps we can address some questions after. As Zhenhui mentioned, I run a practice in KL called Konzepte, but more importantly, I run a research in practice studio, which I guess we're a bit more heavy-handed on looking at the world around us and trying to address certain issues and certain, I guess, challenges we face as humanity. I guess from a perspective of being Malaysian and specifically being in Klang Valley as well. I'm a East Malaysian by background, trained in Australia, but very proud Malaysian, and have been back for the past 6 years. So that's a bit of my background. We are in this situation right now where we feel that, or at least, and I'm part of that momentum to a certain extent, where we consume architecture in a way where there is really little undergirding substance. I know that's a really I guess, harsh appraisal, but we just live in a world right now where everything is thumbs up and thumbs down. We consume it at a rapid pace, very often merely visually. And we are preoccupied with how things look like. And we are attracted to things like these, which are, to me, dangerous. And we put up monuments to, I guess, signify this sense of progress, this aspirational nature of humanity. But we forget that there remain containers merely for buildings that may be dysfunctional. In this case, KLCC is a great case of a building that's been designed to look like something, but operates poorly as an office. So we as a practice are more interested in exploring these other spaces beyond what things look like, but perhaps how things feel like, how things work, and how things behave. And that's sort of, I guess, the container and the filter and also the lenses with which we look at the world around us. We prefer to stay away from form. We think more in conditions, environments, and situations. This is, a very interesting slide that I've used in all my lectures. I won't tell you which one, but one of these buildings are in KL. The rest, one is in Melbourne, another one in Milan. But when you look at them, the floor plans all look the same. So we feel that we live in this kind of a situation right now as humanity, where this is a representation of a apartment unit, where you've got a bit of a living area, a bit of a toilet, a bit of a laundry, a bit of a kitchen, a bit of a bedroom or bedrooms. And we live in this situation where, we're given bento boxes, and as architects, we design bento boxes, which is a bit of everything, but actually it's quite boring. And to a certain extent also, if you have this every day, it's not exciting. Even though we package it in different shapes, we are still creating bento boxes all around. So I think as a practice, we have queried that. We understand the drivers for these bento boxes. They are commercially lucrative. Developers love repetition. And the problem is that the market, or people in general, are then educated into liking bento boxes. And so we design bento floor plans, and further to that, we then design towers of bento boxes, and obviously that is then replicated and distributed throughout our city. So I think that is the position I feel we as a practice have sort of entering into. I guess the question is, as architects, what kind of a position we take as practitioners, as thinkers. Do we perpetuate this form of thinking and the making of our cities and our buildings and our built environments, or do we begin to take a more political stance so that our buildings become a position against or for a certain thing? So our practice is called lateral, and I think today I want to talk to you about a series of operations that we have undertaken as a practice. So these are, one would argue, not necessarily architecture or architectural in outcomes, but are very much so grounded in the making of something and a position for or against something. So in no hierarchy, in no sequence and no order, I'll take you through a series of ideas that are very simple, but that begin to, I guess, explore a newer way or a different way of thinking. None of these are rocket science. None of these attempt to be complicated, but we hope that they, as a practice, in putting these buildings out there, hope it provokes a particular discourse or dialogue in built form, obviously. So I'll start with it's going to be a whole series of ideas, about 10 ideas, some repetitive and some otherwise, but we'll talk about projects through the ideas rather than projects in themselves. So I wouldn't show you too many pretty pictures, but rather the process of getting there or getting to a point where we can show you something. So this was a project we were invited in competition to work on in Port Moresby, which is Papua New Guinea, if you guys are familiar with. It's a really strange place with very little context or built context. So we were asked to put a really large office tower in the middle of nowhere. The client wanted a really large footprint and a fairly squat building. Our argument to that was the deep footprint would end up making the building so deep that sunlight or natural light would not be able to get in. So we proposed 2 buildings instead of 1, to which they rejected. Further to that, we say, hey, why not we then bring the 2 together? And obviously, it looks complicated, but simple move. But what this does is that it opens up my first point, which is to open up new grounds. So the relative, our idea of a building and a site, and a building that sits on a particular site or ground, perhaps is then augmented in this situation where new ground planes are set up. So rather than thinking of this building as 20 stories, rather they are now stacks of 5 stories. And what it does, it sets up a really interesting situation where the outdoors is immediately against the indoors. And it also questions, I guess, puts into question this idea of how we work, especially now, and this was done a good 5-6 years ago, but especially now, in the era of the pandemic and post-pandemic, the question of how we work is front and center of where the discourse is at. So this, I guess, proposes another way of thinking where the building is now a community through the way it's stacked. And you can see the floor plats are highly efficient and hyper rational, but in a simple move and in an attempt to create these new ground planes, a new typology is formed and sectionally becomes porous and open and encourages cross looking and overlooking. So this is how the building stacks up. Again, we're not so interested in the end result as we are in the series of ideas that it addresses. And this idea we've also looked at for a slightly different format. Sorry, I hear hissing in the background. Is that just me? Okay, I think it's gone now. This is another project that we worked on in Phnom Penh for a new headquarters for one of our clients. Phnom Penh is a great and amazing city. The same way as Ho Chi Minh is, it's sort of the life on the street, its vibrancy and energy is second to none. Very unlike KL, where we are really concerned about the sun and escape into our shopping malls. People spend a lot of time on the streets. So we wanted to capture that idea of pulling and creating new ground planes further up the building and pulling the street up the building. Again, a very simple move. You can see that none of our moves are complicated. To a large extent, they are highly low tech. We are not interested in overtly complicated maneuvers. And what this street does is that it juxtaposes and creates this juxtaposition between these air-conditioned areas, which we understand are necessary, obviously, as people work in, especially the tropics, then the need for air conditioning. But the argument for us was then, all the meeting rooms are semi-naturally ventilated. What if we brought the street up? What if you met in cafes and gardens and garden rooms instead of air-conditioned meeting areas? And if this becomes the third method to navigate the building via this vertical street, And the powerful gesture it makes in itself, the building becomes a critique of every other building in a city. All right, let's get on to operation number 2, which is really this idea that, and with, I guess, a preoccupation of architecture and architects of a building as a container or as the endpoint. We were in this project more interested in the parts that made up the building rather than the building itself. Again, you can see buildings like this lend very little identity and address to each and every user. Rather, it's preoccupied with itself as a whole. So the project's again in Cambodia, and this project's been built. The client called for, the brief called for a large 15-story tower in a neighborhood which was full of single-story buildings, except that building in the distance, which is about 15 stories. So for fairly low-lying, our argument with the client was that you've got to be a bit more contextual with how the building sits within the site. And we told the story of perhaps this idea of the part or the home, each and every home being able to be celebrated on its own, and that the community or the building was a result of bringing these individual homes together. So instead of one big building, we designed 6 small buildings or 6 small villages and communities that are brought around a courtyard. So there's no corridor in this, or no closed corridor in this building. Rather, you enter and you arrive home via a courtyard. So this is a really interesting project that we worked in Melbourne, but it got built in Cambodia. So we had to resolve a lot of communication, technology, and obviously buildability matters from remotely, which is a very interesting process. We had a fairly interesting client, and the thing is built. It's being fitted out right now. So it's a strange building that's sort of a sum of its part rather than starting from how we wanted it to look. And the best part of the building is actually the little Khmer house that the client added at the last minute on top, which again goes to emphasize this idea of a hybrid, where the component parts make up the whole. Another building that's another project that has built upon this idea is a project that's currently about to start construction in Kuching, in Sarawak. We were fascinated with this typology of a village where as a whole, it looks complex and varied and diverse, and they're connected by these walkways, this infrastructure of walkways, which are common and public. And what's lovely about this is that the individual houses did not lose its own character. The individual owners had every right to modify, extend, paint their house in a certain way to preserve a certain address and character of their own. And as a whole, it's highly complex. And we literally copied these ideas. So this is one level in the building. It's an apartment block. So the apartments are angled. I'll explain why later. But they connect via a little gangway to the central walkway. So as a block or as a unit, they are varied. But then as a whole, they come together in a very complex way. This is another 3D showing the walkways relative to the unit. So you really get a sense navigating the building that you're walking along this boardwalk, if you like, and then you're branching off into each unit left and right. And it stacks up then as a village which is connected by these walkways. This is why the units are articulated. Firstly, to avoid the north sun, and the other to avoid direct overlooking of its neighbors. And so they end up through a very simple maneuver, finding an end result which is complex, So these are little experiments into designing from the other end, where we design the parts and the rules around each part rather than designing the building. The building is a result of rules we've set up at a granular level, just so that you feel that it's been resolved. All the structures line up despite its complexity, and you can see that the governing grid is at a diagonal, and it works from the basement all the way up to the top of the building. And so this is breaking ground later this year in December. The next project is our critique on the facade, or the end form of buildings around not just KL but around the world. This obsession with iconism and representation. And you can see this is a slide I show a lot in my lectures. This obsession with being able to see KLCC from every project, even though they are 20 kilometers away and KLCC is not visible. We, as Malaysians, or at least as Klang Valley people, have this obsession, which is deeply strange. We took a piss with this project. We instead say that, look, it's not so important. Our building is more important than KLCC. So let's, and it sits on a really interesting site on Jalan Ampang. It's very close to KLCC actually. But it sits at this point of transition between what we understand as a golden triangle, or the city proper, and the suburb, or Ampang itself, which is a lot greener, a lot low-lying. The building is very skinny, so it's very good for solar orientation, obviously. But in the facade, in articulating the facade, there was this attempt to face the city, literally, but also face the parklands, or the lower lying parts of Jalan Ampang, as a move. That is then further accentuated by introducing meeting rooms on the facade, which further then allow the building to step down towards the street. So the facade was not trying to look like something, but rather the facade was, in its attempt to address its tension between the city and the suburb, became something of its own. So when you arrive from either side, there was an attempt of the building to address it, quite literally. And it's in that folding of the skin that we have inserted meeting and usable space. So the facade becomes this living and deep skin, and obviously serve its performative properties, and it allowed then the added bonus of terraces outdoors. The next project is our preoccupation for making spaces and creating gaps within the building. We work with on a lot of service apartments and highly dense buildings in the city and in the fringes of the city. There is really little room working on these projects to create, well, any third space because of its highly repetitive nature, and obviously cost comes into that when you are talking repetition. So what we tried to do in this particular project was to convince the developer to say, hey, instead of creating a whole bunch of spaces which are small in each unit, why not we extract a small space, in this case the laundry. We argued that why do you need a small laundry in a small apartment? So if you save the laundry in one unit, on a floor of 10 units, you save 35 square meters. In a building of 300 units, you save this amount of space. And instead of thinking about facilities or amenities at the top of the podium, what if we insert it at different levels, and to break down the community into a stack of smaller villages? So this is in a prelim design stage. It's next to, or very close by, Tung Chien Hospital. Another project, actually this was a series, one of a series of experiments that we did for an exhibition. And this was about, again, looking at a corridor as the last domain within high density residential developments. In its current situation, these corridors obviously do not discourage any form of lateral movement because the lift becomes this vertical connector. So the experience of coming home is very mechanical. You enter a lift, you exit the lift, you walk down your corridor, you enter your unit, not unlike hamsters. So we proposed instead to say, what if all the levels are linked together via a spiral, instead of well, obviously assisted by the lift, but it was possible to walk up the entire building or even cycle up. And obviously it's at a gradient that you can cycle or even go up in a wheelchair if you have strong arms. And then the amenities are a series of steps stacked together, and ultimately to create a building that is both efficient, but also maneuvered or experienced and navigated in a very different way. It's actually a very efficient floor plan because the circulation and the geometry of the circle results in a very compact core, but also then on the fringes on the outer facade, a very large facade. Obviously, we had to print this out to verify its feasibility. Of course, this was never built, but again, it presents another way of thinking about high rises in the city. This one is Hammond House, and this is one of our preoccupations in designing a building which sits within a city, of how to bring the city in. Right? How does the building touch the ground? How does the building expand its presence? Not through the way it looks, but through the way we design it. How do we bring a part of the city into the building? And how do we expand the presence of the building into the city? The site is extremely tight. It's a small bungalow lot on the corner of two roads. It's about 11,000 square feet, if that makes any sense to all of you. And the wonderful thing is that diagonally opposite are two amazing century-old rain trees, and we wanted to bring that in. So we cut the bottom of the building, and these are sort of a series of operations again on form, on mass, and as a result, form is generated. In this case, lifting up the corner at the ground so that the site expands across the street, and then further cuts up the building to address certain urban aspects, and then reinserting urban scaled spaces up the building. We won this project not because of the design. We won it because we came up with a workable structural solution, and which allowed a very small site to house both a car park and then apartments over. So the whole building is built on 4 columns, which you see in red, and a big table before the shear walls go on top for the apartments. So it's a very simple move, but a really urban scale move. So at the ground, the building opens up to bring the street in. At the mid-level, the city comes in, and obviously at the top. So the building is under construction. We are expecting to see it completed at the end of next year. We are preoccupied with stairs, as we are with corridors. We again feel that in a high density, highly repetitive building, the stair and the corridor is the last opportunity to create an interesting thing. So this is a project that's about to be approved in Kuching, again, my hometown. The building is a result of its planning parameters. So, we did not design a form. The planning parameters designed the building for us, which is kind of good. We got the design for free. The building is really simple. It's a C shape with an open core at the back. So what we tried to do here was use the fire stairs as an opportunity to connect all the floors and to create new opportunities for the community to meet and gather. This is just an interesting unfolding of the skin. So you can see the back part of the building becomes these sort of platforms, and they form these amenities and shared spaces, anything from a library to a yoga deck to a gym, are all housed in this vertical stair slash vertical street. So the stair goes beyond being a stair. It becomes a communal device. This is for our little studio in Melbourne. So we didn't have any work during that time, so we became our own client. There was this critique in how does a space expand beyond a space? How can we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lives out of one footprint? So how do we get 300 square meters out of 50 square meters? How do we bend time and space through thinking about density? We learn a lot from obviously Hong Kong and all the micro living arrangements that people live in. It's a tiny space of about 35 square meters. So on one side, we have obviously the proper workspace. On the right-hand side, we have basically a very simple idea of shifting walls or shifting bookcases, which are obviously movable and adaptable. But this is sort of a critique again on this idea of the permanency of architecture. Can we, through its double life or triple life, expand its utility as well as its sustainability? So if you could get 3 functions out of one building, it's technically 3 times more sustainable. So in this case, it can be used as an office, as a workshop, as a ping pong arena, obviously as a sweatshop, a party, an exhibition, and so on and so forth. The next operation is looking at structure. I mean, the way we think in the office, again, form is not the agenda. We are always keen to look at how a single line can be both form, it can be structure, it can deal with cost, it can deal with utility, it can deal with ultimately also how the space feels like. So in this case, this is for a little project in Phnom Penh, and an office building, where we I guess took a bit of inspiration from the forest. And what if instead of thinking of structure as a as being on a Cartesian grid, what if the structure is the architecture, is the idea, is the sun shading device and the screen? So in a way, the structural engineers were the designers, and all we did was put it together. How am I doing for time? Am I still okay?
You're actually ahead of time. At 7 minutes.
Okay, I'll quickly breeze through it because I've got quite a few slides. This was for a exhibition, again, a small little exhibition we did with, I think it was CLAF a few years ago. Again, it was our critique on the state of our housing in our country. We've moved from this state, which is our kampong, where we've got, 10% of, if you like, space is private, and 90% is common or open, to a situation of like a longhouse. Labat, you'd be probably quite familiar with this, where 70% is common and communal and 30% is private, the bilik. To this situation now, which is where we're in, at least in the Klang Valley, where 70% of our floor plan is private and 30% is common, and again, the corridor. So this is what you typically see in a service apartment situation, where the corridor serves no other reason and utility than getting you from A to B. And we set up situations like this where our units have moved from what we see on the left-hand side, our kampong house, to a situation where we see on the right-hand side our apartments, which is only single-fronted with a corridor on one side. So we wanted to look at the possibility of introducing, dual frontage terrace houses in the sky, where we open up the plan and activate the corridors. So we put corridors on every 2 floors instead. And in doing so, we were able to bring the width of the width comprising of 2 corridors together, which allowed us then to use it as something beyond a corridor. So again, a really simple idea. Again, a speculative one, but perhaps asking the right questions. Setting up a situation where the corridor becomes a domain on its own, rather than just serving the utility of getting from A to B. And the corridor was widened and thickened to a point where it can begin to accommodate communal activities. And the next project is one which is a master plan. And this operation was about, and this is something we do a fair bit in the office, and perhaps something that you can consider, or process or discipline that you can consider in your respective design journeys, which is to not start at the start, which is to start in the middle. In our case, we were asked to do a large master plan. But instead of starting with roads and obviously buildings, we were more interested in open space. So we started with open space. And the open space being the center of everything, rather than the building being the center of or the buildings being the center of everything. And connecting the open space, and ultimately then bringing the buildings around these open spaces. So a master plan that was designed from the middle outwards rather than from the start. Again, this one was a competition we didn't win. But again, we use a lot of these competitions in our office to explore ideas, to critique existing ideas, and as a point of reflection for us. In this particular one, we were called to design a small building for service apartments. We were very interested to explore the design as a democratic act or exercise, which involved the community rather than us as designers, playing God and designing for people, but design as a participatory act or process involving the end user. So we worked very hard to develop a modular grid. But more interestingly, it was about then going, how do we design the unit or the module as simple as possible, and then empower our buyers or our users to begin to modify the units. So in this case, we look at the different profiles of possible buyers, from the individual to families to extended families. And we allowed them ways of engaging the design process through being able to order your home via an app and being able to join the design process. So the design becomes this outcome of the architect and the user, rather than the architect's hand alone and the developer's hand. but also, obviously has to meet all structural requirements, cost requirements, and such. So it becomes this community which is highly diverse, not because of our own hand, but rather because of the complexity added by involving the actual people which live here and buy here. So it's kind of this mountain or village comprising of different design decisions by different people. And you can see why we did not win it. Because it's not sexy. I think this is my last project. Very quickly, I'll take you through it. This is a project we won 3 years ago for the Vietnamese Museum in Melbourne. It's quite strange. We were asked to design it Malaysian, designing a building in Melbourne for the Vietnamese community. I found that quite amusing. But I think we won it with these 3 words. We told the client that we did not want to design a white box with things hanging on walls. Instead, we wanted people to experience the journey that the Vietnamese boat people took from Vietnam to Australia, literally by walking the story instead of looking at the story on the wall. So in summary, this is a journey. You leave Vietnam because of the war. You jump onto a boat where you were attacked. Many people lost their lives at sea. They were raped. They died of thirst. Boats capsized, and then worse still, where they ended up in places like Malaysia or in Thailand, where they were put into camps. And they stayed there as stateless people for a long time. And ultimately, the Australians opened up, obviously, a pathway for them to get to Australia. So instead of designing the building, we designed the journey first. So the building was simply a thing that the journey intersected with. And obviously, then the columns, the glyph core, and all these other things come in. These were the series of diagrams that won us the competition, but the building is a series of, the building itself is the experience. So you walk through the story rather than see the story on just walls. Highly compressed spaces to evoke the physical dimensions of sitting in a boat and squatting in a boat, and the apertures that you would get when you were sitting in the hull of a ship, to the point of new hope, where things open up and they look over the new land that they've arrived at. So we're just about to get planning approval for this, which is very exciting for us. And the state has committed half its construction budget. So we hope to break ground next year. Okay, this is my last slide. And then this is a diagram I draw for every young person joining our office. If we could draw a graph about the way we work, we like to work in a space where we make as little effort as we can, but achieve as much outcome as we can. And this space hatched in pink is sort of the domain that we operate in. So we don't like things that require a lot of effort to achieve very little outcome. So I think as designers, we live in an age where there are a lot of problems, especially over the last 2 years. I think there are even more problems with the world we live in. We already had a lot of problems to start with. So I think we have to be cognizant of the time that we're in. Ideas come from everywhere. As you can see, the ideas that we work with begin outside architecture. But at this point in time as a practice is the medium with which we are working in. Maybe, who knows, one day we could be working in a space of, I don't know, education or technology or something else. But at this point in time, we deal with buildings. So I think as designers, we do have to be, I guess, connected with the world around us, and we have to think from that perspective, or at least be agitated by the world around us and then respond to it. So that's a bit of, sorry I had to go through a lot of slides, but that's a bit of what we're up to as a practice, how we work. And there's still a lot of other things that if I had more time, we'd love to go through, but hopefully that gives you an idea of who we are, but more importantly, how we work. Thanks.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing this, Nicholas. Those were indeed some very insightful ideas of yours. I like in particular the commune project where you talk about building parts instead of the whole building. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to the Q&A session. Don't forget to mention your name and where you're from. If you're a bit shy to speak up, feel free to use the chat box. Any question?
Sunida has a question.
Please, Sunida.
Okay, let me type in the chat box real quick.
Yeah, sure.
In the meantime, can I ask a question? Because I know you have to leave soon for the meeting. When you were designing the Vietnamese museum, right? Because I'm having my final year design project this year, so I'm working on this indigenous museum to represent all the cultures in Sarawak, and I try so hard to avoid iconography because it has the risk of essentializing the culture. For example, there's this building in front of the airport that has this draping Puak Kumbu, so it's like a literal translation, right? So in my opinion, it's not. I don't want to go that way because it risks like showing the people that Ivan is just about the Puak Kumbu and nothing else. So in your project of Vietnamese museum, right? In your opinion, what is the best way or process to represent certain culture? Is it something tangible? Is it something intangible? Things like that.
Yeah, I think I'll answer it from my perspective. I don't think I represent all architects, if you like. At least for me, representation is dangerous. At least visual representation. There's always a need for it, like Johor has this great big pineapple. And obviously you look around, I won't mention which architect, but the Pucuk Rebung, the Songkok, I think it's dangerous. I think at the end of the day, we are designing spaces that contain people and activity. And we have to think as architects from that dimension as well. And at least the position that we take when we have to represent something, especially when we design, even in our work, say with private developers or hotels or particular clients, they have a certain agenda of wanting to represent, who they are as an organization. We tend to go back, and that was, I think, one of my first slides, where we tend to have conversations with them, less about form, but more about, so for example, if they go like, look, we like a tree as a representative metaphor, right? So we look at the tree and we go, what is it about the properties of a tree rather than how does a tree look? So we go the tree as the property of sheltering, of protecting, of being a home, of a roof over many things. It's a unifier. It's a communal device. So we tend to look at it like that. So far, we've been able to get away with that kind of argument with our clients. But as sort of a personal position, we tend to steer away from iconography, or at least the visual kind. I think it's dangerous and it's patronizing, or can be patronizing.
All right, thank you.
We have a few questions from the floor. First of all, it's from Sunida. She says, I would like to ask, in operational process of your designs, how do your clients come into the picture and how do you maneuver your ideas around them?
Interesting. The clients and we don't say this enough as architects. There is no architecture without clients, and they're our greatest patrons. And without clients, and without a client who, there's no building. If you look at all the star architects out there, so to speak, the stars, right? Behind every one of their buildings is a client who has believed in a certain vision, or has the balls to actually carry it out. Pardon the language. So I would say that the client is an essential part of that process to understand the client, to understand the agenda. I mean, some clients are very straightforward. They just say, Nick, we want to make a lot of money, and we want you to design a building that enables us to make a lot of money. And to which we would say, absolutely. So let's not be naive as architects. At the end of the day, we have to serve the agenda of the patron. But usually what I do is go, and you can ask any of my team members. We know our numbers very well, especially when it comes to developers and their commercial projects which are for sale. You need to know that their motivation at the end of the day it's for financial returns. So we get that out of the way very quickly. We don't go, oh, looks like this, looks like a pineapple, looks like that. And then we go, oh, but it costs so much and you can't sell that. And so we always go, you can sell this, it's on budget, it can be done, structurally sound, blah, blah, blah. And once you've sorted that out, at least the clients that we work with then give us a free hand. So that's always our strategy. And that's a political strategy of how we deal with clients. And then we go, okay, right. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I don't care about the 90%, or I care, but I don't try to reinvent the 90%. We look for the 10% to create these gaps, what we call gaps in the office. And that's where, the soft side of the client comes into play, where they go, they have the aspirations of their own as well. We've got a particular client which is really interested in green open spaces. We've got other clients who are interested in more visual sort of design elements. So they're all nuanced, but the fundamentals of them, of the way we approach our buildings as well, all our buildings really is being able to address their primary agenda. In most cases, it's about making money, and we should not be embarrassed about it. Yeah, because building costs money. Buildings cost money to build.
Nicholas, I have a question.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah. My question is, it was a really kind of really inspiring project. You did quite a lot of things that is like, let's say the competition, or there are no clients and whatnot. But how do you manage to fund all this competition, because you take a lot of effort and manpower to idealize all this stuff?
Oh, sorry. What's the question?
So the question is, how do you fund yourself to do all this? Yeah.
I rob a bank.
These non-profit projects, for example, like competitions.
Yeah, we as a practice, I mean, depending, right? Like, I think every practice needs to set. Every practice has a particular bent or agenda. Like for us, some practices is all about making money, right? So like, let's not waste time with all this nonsense. Let's just get it out quick. Let's not even design. Well, we've got this template that works for this client. Let's keep repeating itself. So I know, Jin and I, one of my lead designer, Jin, we sit down sometimes at 2 o'clock or 12 p.m. and Lebat can vouch for this as well. And we are looking at one another and we go, shit, why are we going through this much trouble and setting up these problems? But we could easily have gone down the formula route. Right?
Yeah.
So I think every practice needs to, at least for us, it was a very intentional decision to say, oh, we'll make less money. Literally, we will open up spaces where our team can engage with discourse. And so we set up the problems for ourselves. We set aside time for competitions, or we work overtime or whatever. So it's painful, but that's just the nature of, I think, our practice. Not every practice believes in this way of doing things. So I have no clean answer for how to fund. But so far we've just made less money. as simple as
Yeah,
that.
and that's really, really like commendable, because not every firm tends to do that, because it's it's not profitable doing competitions at all.
Not at all, no.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, okay, one last question for me. What was it again? Yeah, have you ever encountered like really shitty clients that want you to do something that you don't really want to, that's not aligned to your visions or your direction? Like they are really kind of like, okay, we just want to make money, just like pack as many as you need in a high rise, and I don't care about like social values and anything. Just give me an idea that can make me rich, kind of client. How do we deal with them?
It's a good question. Let's put it this way, right? It's a spectrum, right? It's a spectrum of, you look at clients and agendas. I like to think that below every evil person is still a human being, right?
Yes.
So, and I believe it's sort of three things, right? Firstly, if you're able to tell that particular, well, any client really, to say, look, if there are two things side by side, they cost the same, you will pick the more beautiful one, right? Or the more thoughtful one. So I take the word beautiful back, the more thoughtful one, right? But if they're both thoughtful and they're both the same price, then you like to pick the one that maybe has an added agenda of, say, sustainability or social, whatever, right? So we always take that mantra, which is, if we have sorted out the money side, so they know that it's already met they make a lot of money already, then it's not about selecting between the option which is makes less money and makes more money. You get my point? You solve the money issue upfront. You need to make sure that the projects make money. Simple as that. So once you deal with that, then they're less precious. They go, okay, I hear you out a bit further. But obviously, there's always going to be a client which there's never enough money to be made, to which we have walked away from a few clients like that. So you also, in a way, filter, you know, through a process of many years of practice, you know which clients you can smell them from a mile away. And it's not a bad or good thing. I just tell them that, you know, there are going to be architects out there which suit your way of doing things. We are probably not a good girlfriend, you know, and it wouldn't work out. Yeah, so I think that there's got to be choices that you make as a practice, that certain clients just are not good clients. Yeah, and it's okay. It's okay. It's not a right or wrong thing. Yeah, but we're not naive. We're not naive as a practice to say that, oh, we only want to design museums, you know, we only want to design, you know, freehand. No, we're totally the opposite. You know, we always argue that, you know, we would never win, you know, a public project in Malaysia because of, you know, I won't mention anything, right? But we make every one of our buildings public. And we take a service apartment and we think about it like it would be a public civic building. Right, we bring the civicness into the most uncivic building, which is a service apartment sold to, you know, upwardly mobile, top 1% of KL. You know, how do you bring the street into that? So we have our own subversive, insidious agenda as architect. I know it sounds very bad, but we have our own agenda to start with. So we that's what we know. That's our inside joke, right? That we'll never win a museum in Malaysia, but every one of our buildings is a museum, so who cares, right? But maybe that's just us being, you know, sour grapes or whatever. But yeah.
Really insightful. Thank you.
If you don't mind, Mr. Nicholas, we have one last question from the chat.
Please do.
By Zhu Guang, buildings are increasingly turning into investment of speculative investments, and economies are rushing to house growing populations. Is it worth to pursue alternatives and good practices in the face of mass production? Are architects still incentivized to pursue this mode of design thinking?
So what's the question? I don't understand the question. It's a statement. It's a question. Is it a question?
It's a question.
I think Zugong cannot on his mic, so
this is buildings, and as are rushing to house growing population, and is it worth for us to? Yeah, his mic. Yeah, I think his mic is.
Can you ask that again? You're
Am I
breaking up as well.
laggy or-
Yeah.
All right. I'd like to rephrase that, Zuban, in the chat box, please.
Okay, so what I understand from it is that buildings are, well, housing is quickly becoming commodified, right? So it's the investment. And how are we addressing it? Is that a question?
I think he said, how do we? Okay, I'll just read it again.
Yep.
Is it worth to pursue the alternatives and good practices in the face of mass production in architectural world? And are architects still incentivized to pursue this mode of design thinking? Because buildings are increasingly turning into investments or speculative investments, and economies are rushing to house the growing populations.
Yeah. Okay. Look, we are, as a practice, we're deeply interested and passionate about housing. That's for us the cornerstone of a lot of our thinking. And when we have time, maybe we can do another talk around housing. But you're right in your observation that things are now becoming highly commodified. So as designers, we don't even know who we're designing for, right? Because I'm designing for a developer who is trying to sell a property to an abstract buyer, which they've never met, right? And that buyer is also thinking about how he's going to sell his property in 5 years' time when the prices go up to another buyer. So we are in this kind of really weird situation, almost like, where we're trying to design for someone we don't even know. And we're trying to then go one step further. We're trying to predict what that third or fourth person may want in a home, right? I think that's a really dangerous place to be, because we are no longer living in the present and dealing with sort of present issues and problems. And we're living in this abstract world where property, it's no longer, I don't call it housing anymore, I call it real estate, right? So it becomes a container or a mechanism to store value. So I think that's a definition. But in terms of housing, I think we see, at least I see, two ways. One, we build denser. I think densification or density is a really good thing. A lot of people don't agree, but sustainable density, that means you design density in a very sustainable, thoughtful way, rather than just packing 10,000 people into a development. Because density allows you to get more out of one piece of land or ground, so you don't end up having to cut more forests to build terrace houses. And worse still, you don't have to then build further out and then have to then find a way to get people into cities and build more roads and more cars, and the carbon footprint is tremendous. So I'm a big fan of density. I mean, mass production, mass housing, I think these things are all necessary. I think they all have to be extremely thoughtful though. I feel that also the state, the government has to come and be a lot more involved. I don't believe the private sector is really good at developing and building, but I don't think they're good at making homes, because their agenda is totally different. So I think that distinction needs to be had between how housing and real estate. So I'm not sure whether I've answered the question, probably indirectly, but I think that's another talk on housing altogether. Yeah.
Sorry for having bad internet connection just now. I hope that answered Sugang's question. All right, that marks the end of the first half of our session this afternoon, and we would like to say a big thank you once again to our speaker, Mr. Nicholas, for graciously making time to share his knowledge and wisdom today. We hope to hear from you soon again.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Up next, we are pleased to have one of our most talented artists in Malaysia, Kai, to speak for us. Wong Kai or Kai is a designer and digital artist who explores design possibilities in both reality and the virtual realm. Based in Malaysia, Kai started his own design studio, Unreality, focusing on architectural design, digital art, and product design. His work aims to challenge the architecture paradigm and blur the boundary between art and architecture and between virtual and reality. Kai obtained his Masters of Architecture from the University of Sheffield, UK in 2020. He published a joint thesis regarding energy currency, which received high commendation from the university. He was also invited as a guest speaker and panelist in external reviews for architecture students in UCSI University KL. He is currently working as a full-time designer at Studio Hong Yi to manage and materialize the artist's work. Recently, he launched the Thank God It's Monday collaborative exhibition to showcase individual passion projects from the team. Kai, you may share your slides and the floor is yours.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Just to
Yep, loud and clear.
share. Okay, let me share the screen. Correct. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to share my stuff. And also, I was still a bit stuck to what Nicholas said just now, like all the architecture stuff that I've been like not really being involved in the architecture scene for quite a bit. And then suddenly when he told, like, share a lot of his perspective, I feel like, wow, it kind of reminds me what I kind of shifted away from architecture a little bit. Yeah, the reason of being like you don't know, like, who are you designing for, and you're designing for, almost like an abstract client or users that you kind of predict what they like, stuff like that, and then started to become like designing more and more generic stuff, like following templates and whatnot. Like that's just me. Okay. Anyway, hi everyone. I'm Kai, also known as Unreality Kai. So I am a designer for Studio Red Hong Yi by day, and by night I'm a full-fledged digital artist slash interior designer or product designer. So apparently I just like do everything lah, anything and everything related to aesthetics or design stuff. And so you guys could actually like chip in anytime if you guys want to. So I don't want to feel like it's a lecture kind of thing, so that it feels more comfortable in a sense. Yeah, and this is me. The right one is my third year in UCSI University, and then the right one is my first year in master. So I had my bachelor degree in UCSI and then master in University of Sheffield. So last year I just graduated, and apparently it's not a good year, because as we all know, like I graduated at the peak of the pandemic outbreak, and then I decided to come back, and then Malaysia became the peak. It's around, it's not last year, is it last year? Last year around June that time, and then I was like, GG, like came back at the wrong timing, and then I thought I first thought it was a good move to come back at that time, but then apparently it's not. Because when I came back, I started to like send out because I did send some resume back in UK because I want to get a job there, because I really love their weather, even though their food is not really good. But I still want to try my luck and all. And then but apparently it doesn't work out. So I came back and I started to send out a lot of application while I start into quarantine. So it's not a lot, maybe like 20-ish. And some of them reply, some of them just say, oh, it's not a good timing and all. Then I was like, oh crap, I really do like master graduate cannot get a job, and then how am I going to pay all the debt? And then someone just sent me a screenshot of Hong Yi actually recruiting a team. Then I was like, okay, I'm just gonna try my luck lah. I just send in my resume and say I really love her stuff. I do really love her stuff, to be honest. And then I just like try my luck lah, because I don't think my stuff is like artistic enough, because she's already a super kind of international famous successful artist, and she's really artistic. So I don't think I'm on that level to assist her at least. But I did it anyway, and thank goodness she decided to take me in. And this is another two in white. They are also architects. So we kind of like I'm her first in the team on the same batch, and then Cedric and Chichong actually jumped on board a month after. And this is Aspen. Aspen is actually like a product designer or industrial designer, if you like. So he joined us, I think this year, mid of this year, and I joined. Yeah, I joined them. I joined Hongyi since last year November. And then this is the working environment. So I have to be honest, the whole thing, I mean, the whole design process is very similar to architecture. First of all, we get a brief, and then we kind of like brief or brainstorm what kind of artwork we want to produce, or we want to make, or we want to create. And then what is the message we want to convey? What's the issue that we want to talk about? And then we look into material and stuff. And then we kind of like have to do a proposal and pitch the idea to the client, see whether they like it. If they don't like it, we tweak it. And then we give her like a 3 options, sometimes 2, but usually we do 3, and then we kind of like pitch the idea lah. So it's the whole thing. And then that once the client okay, then we go to the fabrication stuff. So I will show you the process. It's very similar to architecture. So apart from designing, we also like get the opportunity to be to be on set, like, because Hongyi always loved to document her stuff, and I think documenting is really a huge thing to it's not just marketing yourself, but also kind of keep track, also show the audience what's behind the scene and whatnot. And that's something that I think that's really helpful for if you want to build your own career, or at least in the creative industry. It's very important to document stuff. And that's Hongyi. You can see like the set is pretty crazy. And yeah, actually one of the Calais fair lah, just pretend to talk and pretend our behind the scene kind of thing. And then we kind of truly act it out lah. We didn't do it like a real thing. We actually staged the whole thing lah. So that's Hongyi lah. You can see the stage. I mean, the whole set is pretty crazy. We have like makeup artists, we have like the lighting people, we have the some people that help the board up to, so that and then we have like art director to decorate the whole space to make it look more presentable kind of thing. Yeah, apart from that, we also do like really doing the art, which is the gist of the job, which is doing the art. So this is one of the quite recent, quite famous art. We work with Time magazine. So we talk about like the climate issue. So yeah, this is what I do on daily basis, poking matchstick into the holes. Yeah, this is one of the project. Yeah, we do have like hands-on project that is really repetitive, but in a way it's also like you don't have to think, like you just like do like labor work. So this is the final look. It's pretty intense, and it's such a like crazy thing to witness the whole world burn, the entire world burns. And then it's like it's a golden opportunity to be working with Hongyi, because you don't usually work on a project in this scale, and then you also get to burn the artwork that you built for like more than 2 months, and then you kind of destroy it in like a few minutes. It's kind of crazy. Okay, so each of us, like in a team, in the core team, which is me and the other 2 guys here and Esmond. So each of us will handle like project lead a project. So this is one of the project that I lead this year, I think since very beginning of the year. So the client is Resorts World, Resorts World, the Genting, the Genting people lah. They approach Hongyi and they say, oh, they really like the previous piece that Hongyi did for World Economic Forum. If you guys have familiar with the piece, that's the Dare Direct Man, also made out of the T-Rex. So and the client say, oh, they really want something similar. So then we kind of like, okay, we think how we're gonna do it differently, because we don't want to replicate the same entire thing, and that looks really no effort. So and then we kind of brainstorm what kind of things we want to say, we want to convey, the message that we want to tell, story that we want to share. So we want to really pick up this kopitiam culture that is dying, because the millennial cafe is like taking over the kopitiam culture, because everyone loves aircon, everyone loves like fancy cafe with fancy decoration, interiors, and nice kind of like Instagrammable coffee. But then so it kind of like replaced the old kopitiam culture, which we think is a loss. It's kind of like a gem in our country, because kopitiam culture is not only, but it's kind of like an integral part of our society. So we want to like voice up the struggle of the kopitiam predicament during the pandemic times. So yeah, we approach the kopitiam uncle, and then we take photos of him in his element, and then we find his like tea making process or coffee making process is very interesting. So we decided to use the artwork, and then so how we did it is actually very similar to architecture process. I mean the technical side. So firstly, we have the photos, and then we posterize it in Photoshop, and then we put it in Illustrator to figure out how many tones we want, and then turn it into pixels. So each pixels represent a color. So the lightest tone, let's say we in this case we have 7 colors, so which means 7 tones. So the lightest tone represent number 1, the darkest tone represent number 7. So each tones here is like, they are like single pixel, and all pixels are numbered. They are labeled and numbered, so that we know how many tea bags do we need, how many tea bags of the certain tone that we need, so that we don't like over calculating, or so basically there's a behind the scene of the behind the scene. And then this is what I'm talking about. So they are actually, so the colors of the tones is actually just a bunch of codes like matrix. So these are the codes that represent the color that we want, that make up that entire piece. So it's actually quite a long process to do this, because we have to keep tweaking pixel by pixel the tones, and then we have to tweak it to look more dramatic, to make more stylized, in the sense that it's not exactly like a photograph. So we want to stylize it a bit. So this is like almost like 8 what's it called, that design amendments throughout the whole process before we start fabricating it. So this is what we do as well. Like I have to experimenting, like how do we get the tones, how do we get the product very similar to what we envision. So we test it a lot, like different layering configuration to test with the size of the pixels, how it makes sense, and then also the colors and stuff like that, and how do we dye it and dry it, stuff like that. And then the most laborious stage is really like making it. So we have to clip it, or clip the tea bags in a strip, and then we have to tie it to the wire mesh with the cable tie and all that. So we almost take like 2-3 days constantly with like 5 people working on this, like just tying it up to that wire mesh. And we also, besides that, we also work with fabricators. You can almost like understand that fabricators is almost similar to contractors. So we appoint them to help us to build the structure, for example. So we do work with them to work out all the structures, the steel work, the what else, like welding, and also calculation of the load bearing and whatnot, that requires more like manpower or more like hardcore kind of work. So we need help from contractors to deal with that. And then the project lead we need to deal with the contractors or the fabricators themselves to solve all these issues out. So basically that's that, like how I work with as a designer with Hong Yi. And I'm going to talk more about architecture, since this is a kind of architecture kind of talk. So I don't want to talk So I know I'm still going to talk about art, but I'm going to like demonstrate how I, started with architecture and how I venture into art, like end up in the art industry, and what's the process in between, what happened in between. So dates back to when I first started my master first year in UK, in Sheffield. It kind of like reminds me a lot of how things could be done, the thought process. It's very surprised that like people at the other side of the world, they really think differently. Like the whole thought process is so different, because I was stuck in Malaysia for my almost entire life. And then how we do architecture is, okay, we get a brief and then tell me what you want, and then we start designing, and then we brainstorm, and then okay, here it goes, the project, and then we pitch. But then in UK in particular, in Sheffield, how we do it is like, okay, you give it a brief, and then we tell you what we want to do. So it's almost like similar, it almost like, they want to do their thing rather than they satisfy the client. So it kind of like wow me a lot lah. And then they really enjoy doing experiment stuff. They really enjoy like inventing new things to solve that issue, even though that solutions sometimes they are not really a building to solve the issue. They just like some equipment or some really, I don't know, some kind of like gadget. But then it kind of like a whole new invention to tackle that certain issue. Yeah, this is the photos that kind of a little collaboration that we did with Bauhaus, something that is really blow my mind lah. And also this is my first year project. How I started my project is like, we have no brief, there's no one tell you what to do, and then our brief is really vague, and then the lecturers or my tutor said, okay, you have to do this creative survey, which I don't know what is creative survey at all, but then I kind of look in this dictionary and ask people around me what is that actually means. So basically it's like you do a survey in a creatively way, which means you can do anything lah. Like you need to do some sort of like event, or kind of like not like event lah, but then some sort of like activity, some sort of like movement that you could gather some information about, and then you can depart from there. So I did this really experimental social experiment that I wanna talk to people. I really want to test out humanity, how far could humanity goes. So yeah, I blindfolded myself, and then like to see whether people will approach me, whether they will approach me. Maybe I look very kind lah, so they approach me, and then I kind of like talk to them and then tell them what I want to do, stuff like that. So it's a kind of like risky or dangerous of like or like really irrelevant kind of things that you do with architecture. But then from here, I started to realize that, oh, actually we can, I want to talk about sensors. I want to talk about like compassion. I want to talk about, a relationship between humans, like what triggers the connection between humans. So you see, the starting point is really something that is really organic in a way. It's not like, oh, you do a museum, like it's not like the tutor slam you a brief like, oh, the brief is like museum, and then they say, oh, you have to do a floor plan kind of thing. So it's like really organic how it started. So I really like this way lah. So yeah, it slowly, how architecture works. So it kind of like turned out into a buildings. In between, it's kind of like complicated lah. Okay, I have to do a lot like design research, look into the site, and then the culture, the ethnics, demographics, the site topography kind of things, and then came up with this thing lah. So it's apparently it's a kind of like a food hall. Also, I really like to insert some of my my own interpretation of how the space would be. But then it's still a really organic spaces that is really customizable by the local and stuff. And I really like the site because it reminds me a lot of Malaysia, because it's multicultural and multi-ethnic. Yeah, this is, and also the way we present is really different, because I always thought presentation is really, just put out a slide and then start talking. But then I realized presentation could be done in a different way, like a comic. You can use a comic to show your space, or you could use like a story, a narrative to show your space, to talk about how a person feel in your space, and how activity could be happen in the space that you design. Yeah, so apparently that's that. So my final year, I did it's a joint thesis project. So there's two person. There's me, my friend Vicky, and I. That it's a joint kind of thing. It's a joint project that we did this energy proposal. So again, it started out like really random. So we had like a studio trip. So we traveled from Sheffield, like the middle of, no, it's kind of north side of UK, England. Then we travel all the way up to the northern part of the UK, which is called Scotland, something in Scotland. I forgot what it's called, but yeah, so the northern part of Scotland. So it kind of like, you know, traveling lah. Then you with a minivan, and then we kind of like build the van out by ourselves. So throughout the journey, we kind of like realized we want to talk about sustainability, but then, you know, sustainable, this topic is so, I don't know, widely discussed, but then not much things have been, okay, there has some effort been done, you know, there's a Greta Thunberg, whatever, voicing it out, but then most of the time that people don't really, you know, take much effort. So we want to use this kind of like design thesis to imagine a world that is what if we kind of like bring that sustainability to another level. So we imagine the world, the future world, that we don't use paper anymore. We use energy. We use energy as currency. So does that make people more sustainable? Because every energy you use is money. So which means you don't want to waste your money, right? You want to cherish every single cent you have. So we have to cherish the energy. Okay, the concept is simple as that. So it kind of like started from there. We look into capitalism, how it destroys our world, stuff like that, and how oil and gas, blah blah blah. So yeah, so it leads me to build a world that is really sustainable using energy as currency. How the world works with that envision kind of like ideas, really crazy ideas, and apparently our hypothesis have no we actually like base a hypothesis through using like blockchain system, which is, you know, Bitcoin. Okay, it sounds very sketchy, but it's a speculative project, and then the whole thing is, you know, to be really brave or really wild and free to imagine the world, because, you know, there's not many times you could do a thesis in master. There's just only one time. So I want to give it all out lah, and do something that I probably won't do in the future, or couldn't do in the future. Yeah. So apart from that, we also have to be really technical, you know, solve out the technical side, circulation and all. So you can see it's very technical. It's still a practical kind of space. So if this is energy headquarter, that's almost like a replacement of what do you call that, the banks, and also the, what's it called again? Never mind. It's an energy headquarter lah. So basically, people exchange energy and educate about energy. And this is the energy parliament, where people, when, you know, all the governments come together and discuss about like how energy could be used, or how energy could be shared, stuff like that. And the right side is, you know, the really technical side, have to do all this tech stuff, but it's also like give us more understanding of how building works, in a sense that you want to be crazy, okay, fine, but how it actually going to be built. So that is also very interesting. So also this representation of, we really like to use like cartoons or out of the world kind of rendering style to show that, okay, this is not a reality, that we want to give people a sense of like, this is not reality, but what it could be, or how uncertain this is, that people could imagine this in another way around. Yeah. Yeah, this is the final board. and then we can't print it out physically because of COVID. So we kind of like did this presentation digitally. Yeah, this is another competition that I did. I think it's early this year, if I'm not mistaken. And then it's for pandemic, kind of a solution of how do we live in a pandemic situation. And then the old building is the existing building is the PPR, and then how do we kind of like modify it, make it more, you know, livelier, make it more happier to live about during the COVID times. Yeah, but what I'm trying to show is like you can already tell like my my kind of like strength, I guess, is like, you know, okay, it sounds very superficial, but I really try to, you know, make things look more interesting or beautify things, okay, in a sense. I really love beautiful renders or really out of the world kind of renders or really kind of like provoking rendering style. So it kind of like slowly paved me to the art scene because usually like this kind of like crazy rendering, people will kind of like question you, okay, how is this going to be built? Like really a lot of technical questions, but then, okay, that makes sense. But then what I really want to convey the idea is how things could be or could be envisioned of, or how our future could be that could be this version of that, rather than how it could be built right away, right now. You get the difference. Yeah, anyway, yeah, it sort of give me an idea of what, also give me an idea of what architecture can do, or and also what architecture cannot do. So architecture, of course, architecture could do a lot of things. Like you could do, you know, it could be really hypothetical. It can be really idealist, or you can really like envision the utopia that you would like, you know, really kind of like Butler kind of thinking. But then what architecture cannot do is like really making that thing happen right away, right now, like building your envision. Like let's say I did this competition, but can I really build this right now? Probably cannot. So it kind of like gives me an idea of the restriction and also the freedom of architecture. You know, it's very contradicting to each other. And then I'm really like wild and free person. So I I take a step back and I kind of like choose which path that I want to go. Yeah, so I want to talk more about how I started my own little studio. So it all started from this exhibition called Thank God It's Monday. So this is almost the exhibition that initiated by my boss Hong Yi. So she really wants us to venture our own thing, you know, to master our own expertise. So she encouraged us to create something, and then every Monday we take a day off to create something that we really want to, that we really like, that we interested in, and then we have an exhibition at the end of the contract, which is around April, I think it's this year April. So this kind of like exercise, or not exercise, this kind of like this kind of event, exhibition, if I may, it's kind of like give us an insight of what each of us good at and what our strengths are. So let's say the top, the leftist, this thingy called birdhouse. I don't know what it's called, but it looks like a birdhouse. So it's made by one of our colleagues. So from here you can see that he really technical on like details, joining and stuff. That really hands-on kind of like person. And then we have like to the right, this is Anis is really good at like photographing, and she joined, no, she participated in the, you know, the Olympic this year. And then she's one of the Malaysian photographer who take photographs for the athletes in Japan this year. So it kind of like give us a sort of like idea of who can do what, or who can do what, and then also give me an opportunity to really push myself into the direction that I really want to go. So I did this mahjong piece. Is okay, it's really random, but then how I started, because I really hate, when I first came back from UK, and then my sister kind of like introduced me playing mahjong, but then I don't really accept the, I know I am actually old enough to play mahjong, but then I have to admit mahjong is pretty addictive and it's really fun to play. But then throughout the process, I kind of like question, hey, how come mahjong is only circulates within Chinese community? How come we, well, you know, when I was a kid, I get to play WoW, I get to play Chongka, or I get to play Gasing. Okay, all these terms you might find a bit retro. Probably I mean, maybe probably Gen Z wouldn't know about all this, but then yeah, that's what I played back then when I was young. Okay, so it got me thinking, how come mahjong only circulates within Chinese community? So I did this to give it a bit of a twist of Malaysian context, a twist of Malaysian flavor that that all Malaysians could relate to, that a game that all Malaysians should be playing with, because yeah, so I also like, this is Iban, the shield for Iban, and then, I really want to be inclusive, and okay, be really inclusive and be a little bit of playful of how mahjong could look like, and then because mahjong have been circulating in Malaysia for 100 years, but then aesthetically it still look the same. It looks beautiful as it is, but then I feel like it could do a little bit more, or a little bit more experimentative kind of look. So I go with this. And also it has a bit of funny face in there. If you could tell what it is, then that's what it is. So after that, like, clients started to approach me because of the exhibition is quite a success. A lot of people started like inquire about how do they purchase a set. So I say, okay, for that time when I did that, the mahjong set is not a product like to be sold, or not a product to sell, because it was more like an artwork, because I just want to like tell my thoughts, because architecture, no, because mahjong is being played in only for Chinese. Why? So I did that. So I don't want it to become a product, but then a lot of people started to like approach me. So I decided to, okay, let's make this more serious. I want to like what if I could make it like a real mahjong, because I was doing it in plywood, but it's really light, even though there's even it looks pretty interesting already with the burn mark at the edge and sides. I quite like this plywood version, but then I managed to do a little bit upgrade using Cheng'an wood. And then the whole process again is very architectural, because I did this in Illustrator, in what's it called, AutoCAD, and then I use laser cut to cut this. Also CNC. You see everything. I mean, I believe everyone here, architecture students or architecture background people, can actually easily replicate of what I'm doing here. Just matter of time. Yeah. Apart from that, I also do interior designing for like close friend of mine. So yeah, so apart from being like crazy and wild, I still do little bit of really technical stuff that is still enjoying doing it, because I get to detail, design every single detail, like the table, the lighting fixture, and then incorporate a little bit of like art stuff, art installation into the studio that so yeah, I still enjoying doing what I do lah. So okay, it may look like, oh, okay, look nice, and then the drawing all neat, but in real life the construction is like freaking crazy. It's like everyone is like, it's not shouting, but then they are taught like really rude, and then they are like swearing words and stuff like that. Yeah, so I have to get used to the environment lah. But I think I'm coping well. Okay, so people actually knows me by my Instagram handle, I'm Reality Kai. So this is my how I started almost my starting point of my digital art career. Also, thank you for Hong Yi, or for like almost like pushing me to this direction. So this is what I launched during what I launched for that Thank God It's Monday exhibition. So apart from the mahjong, I also launched this series called Local Flavor. So as obvious as it is, these are like fast food chain that you can see very often in Malaysia. McD, KFC, Domino, NW. But then why I want to start this is because I really love like building models, really love enjoying rendering stuff, buildings, make it really kind of like crazy buildings. I just love crazy buildings. Okay, I'm I was once a big fan of Zaha Hadid, but then yeah, still a little bit a fan of her, but then my point is I really love crazy buildings. So but then the problem is I don't have client, I don't have like big budgets, I don't have money, to be honest. But then what I have is like my freedom, creativity, and a laptop. So that's how I started digital art like, apparently. So then they are actually all They are all animated, but you can check them out in my profile if you like. Why I started this series is because I find it a bit sad that in Malaysia, it's very sad that we could seldom see anymore, especially in city, that all these like vernacular architecture that's like slowly being wiped out one by one, and then it's being replaced by international style buildings, you know, boxes and stuff. And then yeah, it's very practical, but then it's a bit shame that we have to replace all this beautiful vernacular architecture and then replace with international style. Yeah, so the idea is like, you know, even in MACD, you know, we can order nasi lemak. There's an effort that we will change the menu. We'll change the menu in McDonald's to suit the Malaysian palate. But how come architecture wise we don't do that? We just import exactly replicate 100% copy paste from Western country and then just like bam into Malaysia. So it's pretty sad and harsh lah. Yeah, and this the reason why they did this. And then they are also in NFT platform, in Variable and OpenSea. If you're familiar with NFT lah. Today I'm not going to talk about NFT because there's a lot like first year student. I don't want to, because you guys are still I don't want to complicate you guys with more stuff, but then feel free to look into NFT. And NFT is I would say is the future, or yeah, digital. Okay, that's also another reason why I kind of like advocate to, you know, youngsters or students to really look into different perspective of architecture, which is the virtual world, because we always, you know, render stuff and then we want to build it in the real life, but then how often that could be a reality. That's not really the case, especially in Malaysia. You cannot always read your dream out, because you need to, you know, there's too many aspects to consider. You need to consider about the budget, the client, you know, social issues, environmental issues, and what blah 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 blah. There's just so many constraints that make a building happen. So there's also why I kind of like sway away from practicing as an architect, and I want to be an artist, because I really want my voice to be heard in another way around. It still have the architecture elements, but then another way around, in a more artistic way. This is another piece that I did during Malaysia Day. So it's a bit of, you know, I want to try to like to voice out a little bit of like political issue that happening in Malaysia, that what's make Malaysia today as what it is. And then because all these like political issue, we don't usually can tackle them in a building per se. We can't actually solve political issue with a buildings as like a tangible building. We can't actually do that. So I find it's very interesting. You can do it in a kind of like art way or in a virtual way. And then this is another piece that I did also. I did during Merdeka Day. Also, as if you can tell what it is what it is. Okay, yeah, something that I really want to tackle, because I really want to tackle a lot of like political stuff. Really want to voice out a lot of like political situation in Malaysia. I really love, because when I was studying in UCSI University in undergrad lah, we don't usually get to talk about politics. Like, it kind of like forbidden to talk about it, because it's very dangerous lah for the school image, for the uni image, and also for the lecturers. Whoever brought up this, and then it will get cancelled lah. So when I was in UK, wow, every single student like talking about politics. Yeah, feel free to critique everyone. Like, you know, Boris Johnson, I guess. Yeah, he was like, everyone was like bashing him with their thesis project. They're bashing about Brexit. They bashing about like how Boris and stuff like that. So I was pretty amazed by that lah, like how students could be so really criticized about their government. Yeah, so this is my way to voice out myself lah. So yeah, I guess that's all. Yeah. So this is me. I like to travel, I like to shopping, I like to look good, I like to talk, I like to eat, I like to be fit, I like to be happy, I like to be free, and I like to have a life, and that is why I create architecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you for interesting presentation, Kai. Unlike those stuff that you like to, your project of having energy as currency really reminded me that architecture can actually really be fun.
Yeah.
Now we have once again come to the Q&A session. The floor is open up for questions, please.
Can I ask, someone asked me to ask a question.
Yeah.
So they want to know what kind of software do you use for your drawings and renderings?
Actually, I use quite different softwares. For the if you could recall, I lazy to reshare the screen. For the first year of master, I did that, the neon thingy, the food hall thingy. I use SketchUp and Lumion for that project. And then for my master thesis, I use Blender, almost purely Blender, and then I render it in Lumion. I don't know why I don't render in Blender, but I render in Lumion. And then for all my NFT stuff, I build it in Blender and render it in Blender. Yeah, but again, I don't like, people always say, oh, I kind of like advocate about how Blender is good and whatnot, but then again, I don't like encourage anyone to use particular software to create particular kind of look. What really make your project interesting is the message behind it. It's not the how you render it. You know what I mean? because even you can use all this software to do your project. If your concept or your idea is not refreshing or it's not wow enough, it still doesn't do the justice. Yeah.
May I know who's your tutor back in Sheffield?
Brian Davis is my master, is my like final year tutor, and for my first year master is Caroline.
Caroline who?
Caroline Butterworth.
Oh, I think I know Caroline. Oh, all right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Do we have any question from the chat? Well, if not, I do have one question. As I have known, sorry, can you hear me right? Oh, I'm lazy. Okay, right. As I have known, right, Hong Yi's Dogecoin project is one of the largest NFT artworks being sold in Malaysia. Yeah. And in your opinion, right, do you see NFT as a trend, a speculative industry, or actually a gateway for more and younger artists to be explored into the art industry more easily? Or as an artist, right, what do you think that the NFT future would be?
Okay, actually I did talk about NFT for that talk for KLAF last 2 weeks. So apparently NFT, I would say, is it kind of changed the whole landscape of whole art industry. I'm not sure about architecture, but then for art industry, it definitely already changed the whole landscape. Most like more and more artists are shifting into NFT. I wouldn't say it's a trend. Is it a trend? I'm not sure if the term trend is suitable for this, but then I deeply believe that not just NFT, but the whole crypto scene will take over our whole world lah. You get what I mean? So like NFT is just part of that. And yeah, I definitely feel yeah, it gives more opportunity and more exposure to young artists, especially like people like me. I don't get a lot like exposure usually. So NFT is such a good platform for like artists to gather around to talk about. This is still new, so we actually have quite a lot like forums or like Discord group or Instagram page that a lot of like artists join together, so we could discuss about that certain topic lah. And then we also have like collectors and investors also in the Discord group that could actually buy your work. So yeah, I feel like it's a win-win situation for both artists and also collectors, because you have to understand that NFT, because usually NFT, you don't have to like actually make your art out in order to sell your art. You just have to build it virtually and then put it in a virtual gallery, and then the buyer will go to the virtual gallery to buy your work. So the whole thing is actually quite sustainable, rather than you build out like a massive piece and then you have to transport it to the gallery by using by using airplane, and then you have to go to certain gallery. The whole thing actually causes more carbon emission lah.
Right. Seems like we have 5 to 6 minutes left for a few questions. Anyone?
I'm curious, like, will you return to architecture world one day?
Wow, this question, I get this question like very often. I wouldn't say I 100% wouldn't go back. Because I believe every opportunity is a good opportunity lah. Let's say if there's a client today, he say, oh, he want to approach me to build something like, let's say, some sort of installation, or maybe like just a house, but then he kind of sort of give me quite a lot of freedom of what I want to do, and also a certain comfortable budget lah, then I would definitely take it. Because why not? Because I still love architecture. Just because I don't have really good client, I don't have really good budget, that's what drives me to doing digital art, which I also enjoy. But then if I have more time, if I have a good opportunity to shift back to the virtual to the real world, why not? It's still interesting one. Oh yeah, I want to show this really quickly. I want to promote a bit about our upcoming exhibition. So we have this 1,000 tiny artworks exhibition coming up on December. That we have like 100 artists in Malaysia to join this event, and then like each artist will create like this 10 by 10 centimeter artwork, 10 by 10 centimeter artworks, and then so together we have 1,000 tiny artworks. So these are the list of the artists. Some of them, they are not artists, they are like let's say Adrian Kent. Adrian is the founder of Studio Kanta. So like you can see, there's a lot like illustrators, fine artists, like architecture dropout like me, and also digital artists, designer, graphic designers. So a kind of mixture of creatives, people who join this exhibition. So I really want to promote this so that you guys can, know this is happening the end of no 12 the end of December. I think it's 17th of December. Yes. Yeah, I think it's a kind of meaningful thing to do, because it's kind of like to promote young artists or promote emerging artists to get more exposure. Yeah, this is a virtual. This is not a virtual exhibition. This is a real world exhibition. Yeah.
Look forward for the event. We have one question from the chat by Shirley. Do you think Malaysia is now a better platform for the young designers to express themselves? Do you think that the Malaysian society is started to value design more, be it architecture or any forms of design?
Was it Shirley? Yeah.
Yep.
Is it Shirley that I know? I have a friend called Shirley. Okay, I think those who asked this question already has an answer for themselves. But then anyway, I just gonna have reply as good as possible lah. I think compared to like 10 years ago, probably like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't know. It's better because we have more like platforms to actually showcase our design. Like let's say we have social media, they have like a lot of like different online platforms you can actually showcase yourself. So in terms of design wise, in terms of creations, you can still have freedom to do what you want. But just that commission is the other story lah. It's very hard to really, okay. I would say okay. There's more and more people cherish beautiful design. Let's say for example, like I don't know, cafes. people are having higher and higher standards of creating interesting cafes, and then that's giving more opportunity of designers. And then let's say for houses or units, I'm talking about interior design. So there are more and more people are aware of higher standard of living lifestyle or aesthetics. Because I want my house to be like Muji kind of thing. Okay, and in order to do this, you need designers to come in to help the client to build him or her dreams. So that's again, you need more designers. So I think recent years, youngsters or people, clients are more aware of the importance of aesthetics or okay, I taught a lot of aesthetics and less functions because I'm like slowly becoming an artist right now. But again, yeah, I feel like it's a good kind of trajectory. Like it's not like we are going to a totally doom or bad direction. Malaysia are going to that kind of positive direction. Just that how you communicate with your client. Let's say if your client is a really shitty one, it's like she wants like super luxurious kind of concept, but then the budget is like super tiny, super like then there's a problem now. Then you have to pick and choose your client now.
Yep. Okay, thank you for sharing, Kai. Seems like we have come to an end of today's eventful presentations. Once again, we would like to say a million thank you to our honorable speakers, Mr. Nicholas and Kai, and also you guys, the audience, for being so supportive. Hopefully these presentations have brought values to each one of you. And for 5th Year Studio, good luck for tomorrow's test grade. You may leave the Zoom session now. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.